Okay, very good. Well, we're going to bring the meeting to order. What are we going to start off with first?
Mr. Chair, first I'm going to just ensure that the committee received the report out procedure. I believe Francie emailed it out as a PDF earlier this week.
Uh-huh. Are you going to read that?
I don't need to read it if everyone received it, but I just wanted to ensure that it was received, and if there are any questions about it, answer any questions that I can.
Very good. Committee, are there any questions about the report out procedure that Francie emailed out to you? Looks like there's none. Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, if it's all right, we'd like to start with, I believe, the Board of Mortuary Arts. Very good.
Mr. Chairperson, committee, can you hear me? Mr. Chairperson, committee, am I coming in clear?
Yes, Sailor, we can hear you.
All right, thank you.
And I might add, this is Sailor's first time at presenting a budget, so. Yeah. Give him a hard
Hello, Mr. Chairperson, committee. My name is Sailor Sinclair, and I'm a legislative fellow at the Legislative Research Department, and I'll be providing the budget analysis for mortuary arts. The Executive Secretary, John Carey, appears in person. To begin, I'll start with a little overview of mortuary arts. The State Board of Mortuary Arts regulates embalmers, funeral directors, assistant funeral directors, apprentice embalmers, crematorial operators, funeral establishments, branch funeral establishments, and crematories. The 5-member board ensures funeral homes, crematories, and licensees, apprentices, and student embalmers operate according to state law. Mr. Chairperson, committee, you do have the budget analysis in front of you. The first 7 pages provide an overview of the agency budget. I can go into greater detail about these pages. If not, I would like to start at page 8.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. On page 8, FY 2021, current year, the agency requests a revised estimate of $325,571, all from the mortuary fee fund, and 3 FTE positions. The overall revised estimate is unchanged. There were budget changes within the major categories of expenditures described below. There was an increase of $4,730 in salary and wages. This increase is due to the overlap between the retiring or has been retired executive secretary and the newly hired executive secretary. Second, contractual services, a decrease of $4,730. This decrease is to better reflect anticipated expenditures. Next, commodities on page 9. The revised estimate includes $8,475 in commodities. This was the same amount approved by the 2020 legislature. Next on page 9, capital outlay, $1,000 for capital outlay. This was also the same approved by the 2020 legislature. The governor concurs with the agency's revised 2021 estimate. I stand for questions.
Many questions. Continue on to 22.
On page 10, FY 2022, the agency requests an operating expenditure of $304,038, all from the mortuary fee fund, and 3 FTE positions. This is a decrease of $21,533. The decrease better reflects anticipated expenditures and a reduction in salary expenditures. Continuing, in salary and wages, there was a decrease of $14,248. This decrease is due to a reduction in the salary for the new executive secretary. Continuing on page 11, there was a decrease of $6,360 in contractual services. This decrease is due to the agency budgeting less for travel and other services. There was a decrease of $925 in commodities. The decrease is to better reflect anticipated office and data supplies expenditures. And capital outlay was requested for $1,000. This was the same as the FY 2021 revised estimate, and the request is due to computer equipment replacement. The governor concurs with the agency's 2022 request. I stand for questions.
Any questions? Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking under, for 2022, the decrease in a reduction in salary, was that something that's going to be across the board, or is it just for this executive secretary?
Yes, Mr. Chairperson Committee, this is for the new executive secretary salary only. Did that answer the question, Mr. Chairperson Committee?
Yes. I probably have a question of why, but then I don't know as you can answer that for me. I haven't seen this before. This is sort of an unusual kind of thing here. I don't know, because the new person is coming in new, are we giving them less of a salary, or did we restructure that position?
Mr. Chairperson Committee, the prior secretary was the secretary for 40 years. The new secretary just started, I believe, in September. I can't attest to why they decided to lower salary. However, I can say that they did.
Thank you, but I think I understand now why, because actually in many ways people were asked to do a 10% reduction. If you look in the budget, so that's what I'm assuming. But I think you've answered my question for me. Thank you very much.
Representative, I don't think this has anything to do with 10% salary reductions. This is just internal with the Board of Mortuary Arts.
Oh, so that's just internal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, continue on, Sailor.
Continuing on page 12, FY 2023 budget year. The agency requests in 2023 expenditures of $308,000 or $308,000 and $394. This is an increase of $4,365. The increase is due to better anticipations of expenditures. Details by major categories are included below. Salary and wages was an increase of $1,326. This better reflects anticipated expenditures and inflation. Moving on to contractual services, which had an increase of $2,805. This increase is to better reflect anticipated expenditures such as rent, travel, and sustenance and communication. Moving on to page 13, commodities, there was an increase of $225. This is to better reflect anticipated expenditures in office and data supplies. In capital outlay, includes $1,000 for capital outlay. This was the same amount approved by the 2022 legislature. The governor concurs with the agency's 2023 request. I stand for questions.
Committee questions. Seeing none, Sailor, I have one just very quickly. How is this agency funded?
Mr. Chairperson, this is an excellent opportunity to turn to page 15. This will outlay how this agency is funded. In the top graph or bracket, there will be a state general fund line and a mortuary arts fee fund line. The state general fund line is 0% across the board, and mortuary arts fee fund is 100%. This board or this agency is 100% funded by the fee board. Below this graph or table is an overview of the mortuary arts fee fund analysis. It provides background to the fee fund and the statutory powers that it derives from. Turning to page 17, shows the Board of Mortuary Arts' licensure fees. To the very far right, the column statutory limit shows the statutory limit of the said fees to the far left. And in between the far left and the statutory limit is a current fees column that showcases the current fees that the Board of Mortuary Arts is currently charging. The next two pages, page 18 and page 19, deal with FY 2022 governor recommendation. I've noted upon that priorly. However, this is a nice overview and graph and charts to kind of paint the picture of the numbers in FY 2022. I stand for questions.
Very good. Committee questions? Seeing none. Sailor, good job. And hope you'll stay around for a few more budgets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I do have one more budget for you.
All right.
Okay, the guardianship program. Hang on, Sailor, for a minute. We do have a question on mortuary arts.
Yes, Mr. Chairperson.
Representative Lynn has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. It says that on page 15 that 10% of the revenue, 90% of the incoming revenues are retained by the agency and 10% are deposited into the state general fund. Where is that? Is that shown here on one of these tables?
Mr. Chairperson, committee, just one moment. Mr. Chairperson, committee, it comes out before it's deposited, and it's for administrative purposes, HR.
Okay, so with the licensure fees, then, for example, if one fee is $350 and then $35 is automatically added to the state general fund? Is that what you mean?
According to my, Mr. Chairperson, committee, I believe that is correct.
So do we have how much that was in this previous year, or?
Mr. Chairperson, committee, I do not think we do.
Okay, thank you. I'm just curious as to how much money that comes into the.
Sailor, could you provide that to the committee?
Mr. Chairperson, committee, I will absolutely follow up with you on that.
Okay. And I have another question. Representative Helmer has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not seeing this, and it's probably here, but I'm not seeing an examiner's fee. Who examines these people, and who pays that examiner? And where does that money go to pay that examiner? I know that you have a lot of application fees, but I don't see an accounting for an examiner, a person that's actually doing the examining, which typically I see on a budget.
Mr. Chairperson, committee, are you referring to the testing examiner?
Yes. It may be called something else, but I'm trying to, yes, you're referring to what I'm looking for. Who does the testing for these people, for all of this?
Mr. Chairperson, committee. To my knowledge, it is the board of mortuary arts that puts on the examination. However, where that money is, who that is actually paid to, I am unsure about. However, I can follow up with you.
I'd like that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, Sailor. If you can get that to us, that would be great. Committee, further questions on the Board of Mortuary Arts? Okay, seeing none. Kansas Guardianship Program.
What's he supposed to? All right. Kansans, hello again. My name is Sailor Sinclair, and I'll be providing the budget analysis for Kansas Guardianship Program. I am joined today by Jean Cron, the Executive Director, and Chris Radke, who appear in person. Before I begin, I will give a quick agency overview of Kansas Guardianship Program. The Kansas Guardianship Program is a quasi-state agency that was established in 1995. The Kansas Guardianship Program serves adults who are without a family or financial resources who, through either physical or mental impairment of disability, are identified by the Department of Children and Families or the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services as in need of a court-appointed guardian or conservator. The Kansas Guardianship Program recruits volunteers who become qualified and trained to serve in that capacity. The first 7 pages provide, again, an overview of the agency budget. I can go into greater detail about these pages. If not, I would like to start on page 6, which is FY 2021.
Any questions, committee, page 1 through 6? Seeing none, go ahead with page 6.
All right. In FY 2021, the legislator in 2020, legislators approved a state general's fund of $1,314,717 for the Kansas Guardianship Program in 2021. There were several adjustments that have been made to that amount. These adjustments changed the current year approved without any legislative action required. For this agency, the following adjustments have been made. An increase of $2,847 based on the reappropriation of FY 2020 funding that was not spent in FY 2020 and has shifted to 2021. And a decrease of $2,847 as a result of the governor's July 1st, 2020 state general fund allotment. Below the adjustment changes the FY 2020 approved to, and committee, Mr. Chairperson and committee, that $1,311,870 is an incorrect error. It should read the $1,314,717. The reappropriation and the allotment created a zero sum, and thus we have the $1,314,717. Continuing, the agency requests a revised estimate of $1.3 million, all state general fund, and 10 FTE positions in 2021. This is an increase of $29,364,000. In salary and wages, there was an increase of $19,391. This increase was due to agency's supplemental request to increase all base staff salary for 6 months. Continuing on page 6, contractual services, there was an increase of $7,973. The increase was due to volunteer stipends to serve wards and conservatives. Moving to page 7, commodities, the agency requests $11,000, all SGF. This was an increase of $2,000. The increase was due to an increase in purchases for data processing supplies, sanitation, and office supplies. Capital outlay, there was no capital outlay funds for FY 2021. For 2020, the agency requested and was approved $10,450 for capital outlay. This increase was due to the purchase of new desktop computers for the agency as approved by the 2019 Legislature when it provided additional funding for FY 2020. The governor recommends a revised estimate of $1.3 million, all SGF, and 10 FTE positions for 2021. This was a decrease of $29,364. The decrease is due to the governor not recommending the supplemental funding for the agency pay plan. Continuing on page 7, supplemental details, the agency requested $29,364, all SGF, for one supplemental request in FY 2021. The supplemental request does not include any FTEs. The governor did not recommend the agency request for base salary increases in 2021.
Sailor, go back up there and read the agency's request of $29,000, all from SGF. Finish that whole paragraph, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairperson, committee. I will start from the top. The agency requests $29,364, all SGF, for one supplemental request in FY 2021. The agency states that the FY 2021 supplemental request is to maintain an experienced and stable workforce, minimize staff turnover, and to maintain a competitive peer-level conservatory baseline salary. The supplemental request does not include any FTE positions.
Thank you.
Continuing on governor's allotments. On page 8, the July allotment capers death and disability. There was a decrease of $2,847. The decrease was due to a 1% death and disability moratorium for capers in FY 2021. The Kansas Guardianship Program was required to submit a 1.1% death and disability rate from the total payroll. This reduction was inadvertently applied to the Kansas Guardianship Program. Continuing on FY 2022 budget year, the agency requests expenditures totaling $1.4 million, all SGF, in 2022. This was an increase of $31,878. This is broken down by category. I'll be starting with salary and wages. There was an increase of $42,850 in salary and wages. This increase was due to the agency's enhancement request for base salary increases in 2022, which would total $58,859. Continuing on page 9, contractual services. There was a decrease of $8,472. The decrease was due to rental reductions experienced in FY 2021 that will not be carried over to 2022. In commodities, there was a decrease of $2,500. The decrease was due to decrease in data processing supplies and stationary office supplies. In capital outlay, the agency is not requesting any expenditures for capital outlay for 2022. The governor recommends $1.3 million, all SGF, and 10 FTE positions for FY 2022. This was a decrease of $58,859. The decrease was due to the governor not recommending the agency's enhancement request for the agency pay plan for FY 2022. Continuing on enhancement detail, the agency requests an enhancement of $58,859, all SGF, to increase the base salary of employees including capers and fringe benefits for FY 2022. The agency states that the last adjustment for these base salaries and wages for staff became effective July 1st, 2008. The agency states that during a periodic review, the agency found base adjustments have not occurred in the last 14 years within the civil service system. The agency believes the increase is necessary to maintain a stable and experienced workforce, reduce staff turnover, and attract qualified personnel, and maintain a more competitive peer-level baseline. The governor does not recommend the enhancement request for $58,859 for the agency pay plan for FY 2022. Continuing on page 9, FY 22 reduced resources. The agency submits a reduced resource budget totaling a decrease of $131,710, all SGF for FY 2022. The reduced expenditures, the decrease is due to the expenditures for the stipend that court-appointed guardians or conservatives receive from Kansas Guardianship Program. Currently, it is at $40, with the reduced resource package, if accepted, would reduce that to $30. The governor does not recommend the reduced resource budget for FY 2022. Moving to page 12, funding sources. As mentioned, Kansas Guardianship Program is funded entirely by State General Fund. And moving on to the last page, page 13, details the governor's FY 2022 overview of her recommendation. I stand for questions.
Questions? Well, while they're getting their questions together, I do have a couple. On page 9, where it says the agency requests an enhancement of $58,859. Do those employees have the normal steps that we have as most state employees?
Mr. Chairperson, committee, they do not. They are a quasi-state agency. They do not receive or go by the step program that state employees go.
Okay, so they don't get merit raises or anything like that, or longevity pay?
That is correct, Mr. Chairperson.
Just want to make sure the committee understands that. Backing up to this year's budget request, 2021, there was what, $19,000 in there, and that was for a half a year of increase, agency request?
That is correct. It would have been for the 6 months baseline salary increase for 2021.
And so the $58,000 increase in 2022 also includes that amount of money?
Mr. Chairperson Committee, that is correct.
So what is that, 29,000? What would their budget be without the 6 months of 2021 in there? A budget request, just subtract 19,000 off of the 58,000.
Oh, Mr. Chairperson, our department downloads the data from IBARS. For salary and wages, it should have been all 29,000 in salary and wages only. However, how it came into our department, it was the 29,000 was broken up into salary, wages, contractual services, commodities, and capital outlay, which is why you see in below the governor recommends a decrease of that 29,000 just in salary and wages. That is why.
Okay, so if we take the 19,000 that is requested from the year before,
Mr. Chairperson Committee, there was an inconsistency in it. The 29,000 should have just only been salary and wages. However, how it came into our department, this is how that 29,000 was broken up. However, it should be, and the agency would state that it should just be in salary and wages only. And because of that, if there was no 29,000, it would be that $1,314,717.
Okay. We'll get to the bottom of that. I didn't bring my calculator. I'm slow on my phone. But anyway, yeah, if you could break that out to us so that we can look at it correctly, that would be great. Committee, any further questions? Representative Ballard.
Not really any questions, but I think this is a budget that we have to realize that they're all volunteer. It's a very unique program, and I think the executive director will explain it. You only get help because you're court appointed. The courts must designate you that you need help, and you come in, and these people are vetted and everything else in the process. They are offered stipends. Not all of them take their stipends because they have to submit a monthly report on each of the consumers that they work with. And as a result of that, that is how I think they're able to balance their money out, because not every single person takes the stipend that they're given, but yet it's a mandatory report that they have to give in. This particular program has saved the state millions of dollars, because you're not paying the salary, you're paying the salary for those people out in the field working it and taking care of the programs, but not in terms of working with over 700 and some consumers. So that makes it very unique, and they don't fit, when they say quasi, with the others. So they're sort of working on a minimum. They don't automatically get raises when others do, but yet they're providing these services. If we had to pay someone to come in and do this, this program would just be astronomical. I mean, it would be almost impossible. But I will let the executive director tell you, this is a program, this is a jewel for the state of Kansas, because you're able to get these services done at a minimum, you know, and yet you're not treated the same as the state. But if anyone is saving the state money and making sure that Kansans are being taken care of who cannot do these finances themselves, that's what makes it very unique.
Committee, further questions? Saylor, if you would break that out from the salaries included in the 22 request from the half a year in 2021, that would be great, and get that back to us. And I think that concludes your part of this. We do have some folks from the guardianship program that'll be here to testify. So, Gene, are you ready? And Saylor, thank you very much. You did a great job on your first two budgets. And thank you.
Mr. Chairperson, I just wanted to say in committee, thank you. It has been a pleasure.
Okay, Gene, you're up. Push your microphone if it's not on. I don't know the button on that. You can either you talk with your mask on, or you can do like I do, which I've gotten tired of putting mine on. So
My ears aren't big enough to hold it up. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I am Jean Cron, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Guardianship Program. There we go, adjusted. And today with me is Chris Radicke, who is the financial business manager, IT person in our office, who wears many, many hats. For the committee, I like to, I know there's some new individuals today. Some of you have some more knowledge of us, but I'd like to be able to give you just an overview of what we do. We're kind of this unusual entity in terms of our structure, but also not usual in what we do on a day-to-day basis. So in the testimony that you should have, I believe it's electronic, I have paper. It just makes me very happy. So I'm going to walk you through the agency annual report, which just gives you a comprehensive overview of what we do. So as Saylor gave in the introduction, what we do as an agency is we work with identifying volunteers who are willing to serve as the court-appointed guardian or conservator for vulnerable adults for whom we can receive referrals. So if you're looking on page 2, if you're following me, I'm just going to do a couple of high points. The entity or the type of organization, this quasi-public instrumentality, we're established by legislation. We have a 7-member board of directors, 6 of whom are appointed by the governor and 1 by the chief justice, and you have 1 person amongst you who knows a lot more about the day-to-day of our organization. Guardianship is about decision-making on behalf of another person to the extent that they need that assistance and support. And as Representative Ballard pointed out, this is a court appointment that goes before the judge to make that ultimate determination based on evidence presented about whether or not a person is in need of a decision maker. Many people have family members who serve in that role or have extended family members who are willing to step to the plate. The individuals with whom we work do not have family members who are appropriate or willing to serve in that capacity. And there's a wide range of reasons for that. Sometimes it's because the person is elderly and family members are also elderly. Maybe they are individuals whose family members predeceased them, and maybe their children, they didn't have children, or their children aren't interested in doing that. People living out of state. There's a lot of variation in how that can look. And so when we recruit individuals to serve in this capacity, it's significant. We talk with them about and invite them to say, this is something that you need to think about in the context of your immediate future. We don't ask you to sign on the line. We simply say that when we ask you to establish a connectivity with someone, to be that substitute decision maker, to be the advocate for that person, that takes time. And also because it's a legal appointment, there's all of the legal aspects of this and the cost related to that. So on page 4 is where we talk a little bit more about how that works. We have a volunteer information form. We ask for references. We do criminal background check. We check the adult abuse registry, the child registry, and any public registers relative to health care, CNAs, nurses, et cetera. And so when you are asked to do this, you are asked to stand in the shoes of another person. And try to respond and act and advocate as though the person were able to give their own voice. Sometimes you can get a sense of that, and sometimes they're not being heard, and sometimes you have to sort out what decision might need to be made, and do I need to make this in a best interest standard. One of the things that is significant to me after having done this for a significant number of years is the longevity of volunteers. I think this is 46% of our volunteers have served in this capacity for 10 or more years, 70% for 5 or more, which means those individuals took seriously our request to them, but also as they were involved and connected to the person, saw the value and the importance of how their decision-making can affect and help that individual. As mentioned earlier, this is a collaborative relationship with our agency, Adult Protective Services. That entity investigates abuse, neglect, exploitation, and also that includes self-neglect. And individuals, social workers at the state hospitals may make referrals to us. We serve adults only who have Essentially, they're Medicaid recipients, which means their assets and their resources are capped, and that the available funds that those individuals have for their personal needs is quite nominal. And so, as was mentioned earlier, we offer a volunteer the opportunity for a $40 per month stipend to offset offset out-of-pocket expenses. And that can include, mailings, copying, traveling to see the person. It's simply a recognition. You don't do something of this type of work and do that for nothing. And as was mentioned, some people choose not to take that. Interestingly enough, having wrapped up January is the time period for providing employees and others with a 1099 form. The IRS views this stipend as the volunteer is an independent contractor. Those aren't our rules. Those are IRS rules, which means that anybody receiving stipend dollars at more than $600 per year, calendar year, we are required to provide documentation to IRS on what they received. That form has just been changed. It's no longer a 1099. It's another one, and I don't remember the name. Some people, in order to, then if you're doing your taxes, you have to be able to show expenses to offset that, and some people don't want to do that. There's a variety of reasons, and so we do have a number of guardians for whom they do not take the stipend, and it's paid per individual that they serve, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. You can see on page 4, it gives you the breakdown, the age breakdown of the people that we serve, and I think those are pretty self-explanatory. Moving on to page 5, just give you a caption for in fiscal year 2020, we served 1,387 different individuals. The court uses terminology of ward and conservatee. We kind of like terminology. It's the person. It's about the person, but in that legal definition is then included. And we did that with a core at the end of the year of 775 people. In looking at, we've been doing this for about 41 years. Not all guardianships are under our program. This is serving one sort of piece of the puzzle. Again, there are a wide variety of types of situations. You have people who have large estates. You may have a person for whom, or the individual is managing businesses. That's the statute says, here's what that guardian and conservator can do. So you can see the difference in kind of responsibilities when you have limited funds. But also, the statute doesn't discriminate. It says you may take a fee for services, and many times in those larger estates, that is something that is done. On page 6, you can see the type of disabling conditions or the issues that people deal with. It includes intellectual developmental disabilities, mental health and behavioral health, dual diagnosis where you may have both, aging related, and those are sort of the larger category breakout. And then below that on page 6, you can see where the type of residence. I think what's important, if you add together the own home and community residential, which I didn't do, that gives you almost 70% of the people we serve are in the community in some level of, and that is distinguished from long-term care nursing home and from nursing facilities for mental health and state hospitals. And so if you think about in the course of years that I've been doing this, when many, many more people were living in more institutionalized settings, even if they were smaller in nature, we've made some great strides and continue to work on that issue of how do we identify appropriate residential supports and services for individuals, and particularly with individuals who have very, very challenging life activities. The last page is 7, and it's just a story to tell you about a person. and why he thrived because he had a guardian advocate. I'm not going to go into that in recognition of your time, but if you want to get a sense of what it means to be on the ground and to be someone's voice and how significant that is for the person who may have been exploited or value systems was so strong. I want my family to be in my life, and yet sometimes family isn't doing what they ought to be doing. So it's a great story about a particular man and his longtime advocate who was in his corner and who was part of being his voice. The last page is just a recap of what you've already received, and that is the budget for fiscal year 2020. And some of you, if you have seen your inboxes today, by statute, we are required to provide the legislature, the governor, and the chief justice with this report, and so it was sent to you this morning. Under the wire, I might add. It's been a little busy. The last part, so I can answer programmatic questions, or I can go on, Mr. Chairman, and talk about the budgetary issues. So however you would like for me to proceed.
Committee, any questions so far? Jean? Okay.
Okay.
Continue on.
So to perhaps add clarity, when we were preparing budgets in the fall and appeals, we had submitted for fiscal year 2021 a supplemental request for salaries and wages. For those of you who were on this committee last year and have a recall, we were before you. We made the request as an enhancement. You moved that forward and through appropriations and into your House budget bill. In the Senate, they deferred it to omnibus, and then, of course, we all know things changed. And so that matter simply didn't get addressed. And we received baseline, for which we were grateful. So as we looked forward, to us it was still an important issue. It was an important issue that was validated and supported by our board of directors. And so we proceeded to submit a supplemental request for 221. And that was for 6 months equivalency of what the increase would look like to us. We then submitted for fiscal year 2022 an enhancement for the entire amount. And I can go into way more detail than you may want. But what we did is we were looking between when the governor's budget was put forward and we closed out our January financial records with savings that we know already, some of which were mentioned in the rental reductions that we had as a one-off, and some other savings relative to travel, since we haven't been doing that. In fact, driving today was the first time I'd been more than 60 miles in months. It's kind of exciting, actually. And the Flint Hills are gorgeous. And so when we looked at our budget, we feel like for fiscal year 21, we could, if the legislature moved forward with full-time or funding for the fiscal year 22, we believe we can find the savings within our 21 budget. And therefore, we are not requesting a supplement in 21. So my testimony to you, committee, and hopefully this is clear, is for fiscal year 2022. And in the event that we would obviously need that moving forward funding if we were going to be able to implement this.
So just so we're clear here on page 8, you probably don't have a copy of this, but so your supplement, so the enhancement that you're talking about is $58,000 for 2022. And that includes, excuse me, I'll have to talk to the mic a little bit better. Francie's always after me on that. So that increased $42,000 in salaries, and then the rest of it's commodities, contracts, and,
I think that's where some of the confusion might be. The 50, so if you look at my testimony, which is what I'm looking at, because I don't have that other information in front of me, and I apologize, that came out of legislative research. So the enhancement consideration is 57,258 for fiscal year 2022. That would be for a full year of baseline salary adjustments for staff. That figure includes calculations for capers. What else do we include, Chris? Health insurance, FICA, unemployment is all factored into that amount. There is purely only salaries, wages, related expenditures to that, no other line item adjustments in that amount. Does that help you? Thank you.
so, but it's $58,859 is the salary.
Or if you do the dyslexic one, it would be 57,258.
Okay.
At least that's what I have in mind, and if it's a calculation of a few dollars,
Yeah.
that's the amount, or very close to that.
That's all right.
Okay.
We have 58,859, but
Okay,
that's okay. So that's purely salaries,
correct.
no commodity adjustments or anything like that. So that's purely salaries for 2022.
Correct.
Okay. And do you recall how much was allotted, how much that we had in our House bill last year for your increase that we did last year?
It was essentially the same number.
Okay.
There was not anything substantively different in that.
And then one follow-up, you didn't participate, your organization does not participate in the 2.5% statewide employee plan.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So one of the usual dispensations is that we have been captured when the legislature, based on a governor recommendation or otherwise, implements a 2.5. I think one of the things that sometimes can be confusing is we know, and you know, that that's not an every year kind of opportunity for all of us. And so part of when we do this, you know, your clarification earlier with Saylor was spot on in that we don't participate in longevity, all of those things under the civil service. We are not within that. And so when we went to look at our positions, there aren't exact apples and apples to compare to, but we attempted to look at descriptions that could mirror the essence of what we were asking staff to do.
Okay. I'm just,
Understand?
you know how I am.
I prefer that, sir.
Anyway, committee questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you for all the work you do. In my other life, I work as a volunteer manager, so I really appreciate all of the programming that you offer. From that perspective, I would also be really interested to know, you know, so in my job, when we do data on an annual basis, we talk about the value of those volunteer hours too, both in the service they provide, but then in the monetary, you know, numbers in talking about, you know, per hour what they contribute. And I saw that you have about 771 volunteers, and I'd be interested to know how many hours they contribute per year, because I know kind of the going national average is about $30 per hour is the value of a volunteer's work. So I think knowing how many volunteers you have and how many hours they contribute, I imagine that they add a significant value to this program and to our state.
Thank you, Representative. You are exactly correct. We, a number of years ago, did a survey of the volunteers to ask them to give us a time analysis. And we received information that was really all over, because some people said, well, I did this, but I didn't count it in the number. And so we've never done an actual survey that says if you do these 15 things and you estimate the number of hours, it might look like this. out of that survey, we just came away with an average of possibly 10 hours a month, but I'm going to say that's probably light. One of the things that I think is important is that in these cases and situations, people's lives go through ebb and flow, crises, medical, other kinds of things, and so when those issues occur, your time is going to be more intensive. And so I would love to look at your 30 times 10 times 700. Actually, you would multiply it not by the volunteers, but the number of individuals they serve. And that's not purely pure because they may be working multiple issues at the same time for several people, and it comes within that time constraint. So I think it's really hard for us to calculate. But a number that I do want to give you is that we simply, as a cost per day number, we simply took the total number of people we served in one calendar year, or in 2020, and took that 1,387, and we took and looked at the overall budget, which included agency overhead, the volunteer stipend, the cost per day, per person, $2.60 last fiscal year. I know that my 2-shot latte was $4.30 that I got 2 days ago. So it's a number to give you an idea. There are people who come on and off. A person may be appointed, the person passes away, and they may have only been on our books for 8 months. But they are counted because that's the total number of individuals we served within a calendar year.
Very good. Last year committee, I had it broke down a little bit different, but I figured the number of participants times 10 hours a month, so it's 120 hours a month or a year that they work. And then I divided that out times $15 an hour, and that's $3.4 million. So however you want to look at it, they save us a ton of money. These are awards of the court. That's what we have to realize is they're court ordered. And a lot of people don't realize that. But anyway, and Representative Ballard, who is always very gracious about this, sits on their board. So just FYI for committee members. So, and thank you for doing that. Representative Ballard.
Thank you. Well, you know, and he did that at $15 an hour. Well, you can have a volunteer that's a judge, as a volunteer that's a MD, as a volunteer, so they would get a lot more if you would look at it. But the point is, it's providing a service that's needed. And you just can't get it. You have to be appointed. But I would just like to point out something that she said in passing. But you know, when you look at the budget, the executive director has always tried to make sure the cost is down. And she just went over how much money we saved in rent. How did that come up in terms of the savings of rent? Did the people just volunteer to do it? But I don't think that's how it happened. Go ahead.
So as we were working and anticipating already last session and what it was going to look like with all of the unknowns, we have several office locations. And what we did is we went to the landlord, actually Chris did, and went to the landlord and said, we don't know what the next fiscal year is going to look like. We are wondering if you would consider a possible rent reduction. And it was through that initiative of our business finance officer, and through that, we received in 2 of the 3 locations rent reductions for at least for the current year. Don't know, and obviously can't anticipate whether that would carry forward. So I think the significance of, and we've done that actually in the past, not so much of asking for a reduction, which we did, pretty nervy of us, I think, but also in prior years, we asked for them to hold when we knew budgets were were tight. And again, had, at least in the Manhattan office, consideration given to that. So it's an in-kind that came from a request to be supportive of the community and where we're located.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, committee. Further questions? Susan?
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ruiz. Sorry, Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering about it if there are individuals who have are in the program, guardianship program, but later sort of don't really need the program. Are there, what do you have numbers on that?
Could somebody tell me where the camera is, where Representative is, so I can look at her? I feel kind of in a void here.
I can see you though.
Yeah.
Okay, so excellent question. There are some individuals that we serve where over a period of time they are able to gain the skills, et cetera, so that they can become their own decision maker again. And there's processes to reverse that by going back through the court. There are some individuals for whom an immediate family member who may not have initially been in the consideration is willing to step forward and say, I would like to do this for my relative. And so there is a number of those cases. In just to give you a number, that actually gets lumped together with the individuals who leave the program because they die. So I would say restoration or guardianships terminated and family members taking over would be 10% of the people who leave the program at some point in the year. And certainly I think it's a meritorious, so I think we need to want to keep looking at that issue. And certainly the other part to that when I do trainings about what guardian authority are we looking at, the statutes gives us guidance on that, and that's a whole lecture in unto itself. But thank you for your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Any further questions? We let you off pretty easy today, Gene.
Oops. On that note, I better quit smiling and put this back on.
There you go. Very good. Thank you for being
Appreciate your questions, your time, your interest. And Representative, I would love to visit with you some more when we both have a little more time to talk about volunteer management.
And we appreciate all you guys do.
Thank you. And I do carry that back to our volunteers and share, particularly when I've been in front of a committee, and that's a valued appreciation. Chris? Oh, Chris Radke is sitting over here. I thought I caught her earlier, but Chris does the financial piece for us. She also does and manages our database, which is antique and sassy, and also a lot of the work that's related to communicating to volunteers as it ties into our database as a way to keep people apprised comes under her umbrella. And like I said, she carries and wears numerous hats. So we are most appreciative of her work. Thank you, Barbara.
Well, very good. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you. Let's see, the guys and girls, how's that work? I gotta quit being so. All right, well, that takes care of those two budgets. Now we have one final budget today. And Martin Boyer, D. Boyer, how do you say that, Martin?
It is De Boer.
Okay.
It is Dutch. Yes. Thank you, Chairman. And hopefully I don't stand between you and getting out of here for too long. I'll be presenting the budget overview for the Healthcare Stabilization Fund Board of Governors. I do believe that the Executive Director, Clark Schultz, is with us today, as well as Lisa Yollery, who's part of the agency. On the first page at the top, you'll see a general overview of the operating expenditures. You'll quickly note that there is no SGF funding for this agency. It is a completely fee-funded agency. In the bottom half of the page, the fund was created to stabilize the availability of medical professional liability coverage for healthcare providers. The fund, by mandate, is a requirement to provide excess professional liability insurance coverage and the establishment of availability plan to provide the required basic professional liability insurance coverage when such coverage is not available through insurance companies. The next couple of pages give you a brief overview of the major issues in the past years, and I would like to draw your attention to page 5, where we have a list of performance measures which were identified by the agency and the governor's office. Turning the page, you'll see a budget trend over the past 10 years, as well as a summary of the operating budget on page 7. I would like to begin on page 8 in the middle of the page on a overview for FY 2021. So in FY 2021, the agency estimates revised expenditures of $38 million, all from special revenue funds. This is a all funds decrease of $17,808, which is less than 0.1% below the FY 21 approved amount. This decrease is attributable to decreased expenditures on contractual services for computer software maintenance contracts. The revised estimate includes 21 FTE positions, which is the same as the FY 2021 approved number. At the bottom of the page, you can see that the governor concurs with the agency's revised estimate for FY 2021, and I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Okay, moving along to 22.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 9, we begin the fiscal year 2022. In the middle of the page, the agency requests $37 million, all from special revenue funds. This is an all funds decrease of $1 million, or 2.7% below the FY 2021 revised estimate. The decrease is attributable to decreased expenditures on court-approved settlement agreements or jury awards. The decrease is partially offset by increased expenditures for contractual services related to legal fees, which include attorneys, expert witnesses, and court costs, as well as salaries and wages expenditures. My apologies, and salary wages expenditures for a 2.5% merit-based salary increase and increase the salaries and wages fringe benefits. The request includes 21 FTE positions, which is the same number as the FY 2021 revised estimate. If you could please turn the page to page 10. Towards the top half, the last little sentence there, the governor does concur with the agency's request for FY 2022. And I'll stand for questions for fiscal year 22.
Any questions? Martin, I just have a quick question. Did this agency receive the 2.5% salary increase for state employees last year?
To my recollection, I do not know. I can look into that for you.
We'll ask the director.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Representative Ruiz?
I didn't ask this question the last year, the last session, but I'm just curious. Do all states have this insurance protection for providers or physicians?
Chairman, I do not know. This is my first year with this agency as well. I will look into that and see what other states are doing for you.
That would be nice. And then I have a second question, Mr. Chair. My second question is, if a physician is sued, well, I'm assuming that the physician carries their own liability insurance, and what we provide is on top of that. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So if a physician is sued, how is the payout for those lawsuits done? Is it a combination of the physician's insurance in what the state is providing? Is it like half and half? Do you know how that works?
Martin, do you know how that works? If not, we'll ask the director.
I do not know directly, but on the first page of the budget, on the last paragraph, it does say that fund loss exposure begins when a medical professional liability claim or legal action exceeds the required professional liability coverage of $200,000 per claim, with an annual aggregate for all claims of $600,000. So that paragraph gives you a little bit of a breakdown on how that works, but I would defer to the agency on the exact procedure on how all of that works.
Okay, thank you.
Committee questions? Okay, thank you, Martin. With that, we'll have Clark Schultz up here. Thank you, Clark. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and Madam Ranking Member. It's good to be here. I am Clark Schultz. I am the Executive Director of the Healthcare Stabilization Fund and have been there since December 2018. Very briefly, the Stabilization Fund, as you have all gathered, provides medical malpractice coverage for medical doctors and other healthcare providers as defined by state statute. The genesis of the Stabilization Fund is 1976, when healthcare providers were finding it difficult to obtain professional liability insurance. At that time, the state legislature passed a new act that, number one, required that our healthcare providers obtain insurance, and it also set up a mechanism for them to buy insurance if they were unable to find that on the open market. And then the third thing that it did is set up the Healthcare Stabilization Fund that would provide excess coverage beyond what they were buying on the open market, and also we act as a reinsurer for the availability plan for physicians and healthcare providers who are not able to find coverage on the open market. So the way, just very briefly, this works, if you are a physician, the first thing you are required to do is to purchase $200,000 worth of base coverage to protect your patients if there is a bad medical outcome. Then they are further required to purchase another amount of coverage from the Healthcare Stabilization Fund, either $100,000 in additional coverage, $300,000, or $800,000. So a physician that buys the $200,000 on the open market and then an additional $800,000 from the fund would end up with $1 million worth of coverage. This, the purposes, and by the way, one of the questions was how many states. I believe there's 12 that have something similar to what we have here in Kansas. The point of this is just simply, it's good on a lot of levels in that it provides a remedy if someone is harmed through a bad medical outcome, and it also provides coverage for doctors who we want to practice, and other healthcare providers that we want to practice in Kansas. And this allows them to find coverage at a reasonable amount. In the bottom of my testimony, I point out that the U.S. News and World Report in 2018, which is the most current figures I have, called Kansas, or rated Kansas number 5 in the states with the least expensive annual malpractice liability insurance. What that does on the real level is if you are a healthcare provider and you are wanting to serve in the state of Kansas, you want to be able to find coverage that is affordable, because if you can't find coverage that's affordable, you might go to a market where you can make more money And in a rural state like Kansas, I think that's very important. So anyway, currently we have about 16,000 doctors. We have 2,000 additional healthcare providers and adult care homes that we provide coverage for. And we are governed by an 11-member board of governors. And we are very fortunate to have Dr. Craig Kincannon, which I would point out is the husband of Representative Kincannon. And our 11 members all serve without pay and meet on a regular basis to set surcharge rates that healthcare providers will pay annually to obtain this coverage. Mr. Chairman, I will go ahead and answer your question. The last year, yes, our employees, with the exception of myself, did receive the governor's and the legislature's increase. And Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious if you can expand on what healthcare providers would be beyond physicians. Does that include APRNs, pharmacists, dentists?
It doesn't include pharmacists, and it only includes oral surgeons as far as dentists. Yes, and depending on what you offer in your practice, it's defined in statute whether you can obtain and whether you have to obtain from the stabilization fund. In order to clarify that, in the statute, it says these people must buy additional coverage from the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. If you're not on that list, you can't obtain coverage from us.
Do you happen to know what the statute is?
I should know that, and I can get that for you, obviously, and I will do that.
Thank you.
It is 40-3401. I was scared to have to sort through things. I thought, I know I probably have it, but I won't be able to find it. Then I'll be embarrassed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? Representative Ballard.
You know, I really have to give Clark, Clark and I came in the legislature together. He's a former legislator. And so it's always a pleasure to see you. But, I was wondering, and I should know this, before we had this stabilization fund, what were we doing?
It was like some states that still do this today. You didn't have to buy coverage. And so if you weren't able to find coverage, you maybe didn't, and then your personal assets would be on the line if you were sued. And you can imagine how that is. If you're a physician and you believe that you're out trying to do good things and for the public, and then you get sued and you lose your house and car and et cetera. So it was more, 1976 was a pivotal year in structuring how we felt in Kansas. And Representative Ballard, I didn't know if I was going to say this or not, but and thank you for your words. I've always appreciated you, and I'm sorry that you weren't able to sing Home on the Range this year. And in 1976, though, when this was all going on, I came here with my father, who was an attorney, and he argued in the Supreme Court. He said, "Hey, you want to go with me?" And I think I skipped school and came up here in what is now the old Supreme Court room. And little did I know, at the same time that was going on, the House and the Senate were debating this language that would give me a future job someday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, my friend. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Some of us weren't even born in 1975, so just FYI.
Mr. Chairman, when I look around, I see that is true.
Yeah, I'm one of them, right? Just curious, Clark, are you able to tell us how much you have in assets?
There is just under, there's about $298 million, and this is primarily assigned reserves, because when we are ordered by a court, or if a settlement is structured and approved by the court, we have to have that, like capers or anything that would have a balance that is available and ready to pay when needed.
Further questions, committee? I'll have one more. You know, we've got this COVID going on. Nursing homes were not exempt from liability last year in the 2016 bill. Do you foresee some problems on the horizon? Also, the Supreme Court ruled on tort reform, and we haven't done anything to fix that yet. So do you foresee some problems in the near future over those issues?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellent questions, and yes, we're watching both of those issues very closely because it matters a great deal. Currently, there are caps on non-economic damages, but the Supreme Court of Kansas apparently removed those in some of their offerings of what they were doing. It looked as though it was perhaps just, it was not on the medical malpractice end. But we don't really know at this point, and so we are very concerned about that because that could change drastically the picture for healthcare workers in the state. And care homes, we are watching that extremely close. We do have a number of notices of lawsuits regarding wrongful death in care homes, and so that is a could be a major issue, and we're watching that. Of course, that's happening nationally, so we will continue keeping up with that and trying to proceed as needed.
I appreciate that. Committee, further questions? Clark, thank you for being here. Good to see you again. And
thank you, sir.
Always.
Thank you, committee.
Okay, I think that concludes today's budget hearings. And committee, this is just kind of a test here. These are small budgets. The others just add a bunch of zeros to them, and they're the same thing. So as we get into that a little bit more. And any questions about this process or anything like that? Representative Vaughn.
And I do need to read through the email that we received about the budget reporting process, I think it was. But I was curious, for agencies that have a discrepancy between the agency recommendation and the governor's recommendation, how do we decide how to move forward with that?
We usually discuss that and kind of come up with what we're going to do. You know, one of my favorite sayings is the need doesn't go away just because the budget hadn't gotten cut. So as we hear these budgets and hear public comment, we do what we feel like we need to do for the people of the state, regardless of the budget. So, and I think you'll see that throughout this year, probably coming up fairly quickly. But tomorrow, we will do recommendations on these committees. If you have any recommendations, feel free to contact me about that. I think we'll have at least one for one of these budgets, at least here tomorrow. Internally, I'll have it ready to go. But we, you know, if you have others, we'll take a look at them. So that's kind of the process. Did I leave anything out, Representative Ballard? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you. We're adjourned.